Peace and blessings, beautiful soul. I am Brandi L. Bates. You can find me on Twitter at Soledad Francis and on Instagram at Brandi is winning. Brandi with an I. Check me out at brandibates.com and you can find these podcasts archived on YouTube at I Am Brandi Bates, the YouTube channel. So, let's talk about stress, baby. Let's talk about stress. Today we're talking about orchids and dandelions. Orchids and dandelions. Think about the beautiful blossoms of the dandelion and the beautiful, beautiful, colorful, rich, exquisite blossoms of the orchids. Okay? So about 80% of us are resilient to stress. We can find ways to survive, cope, and even thrive no matter what life throws at us. Some of us. Some, I stress. That's the key phrase, some of us. But science writer David Dobbs calls us dandelions. We can grow in a crack in the cement, right? No matter where you put us, we're going to survive, we're going to thrive, we're going to eat, right? We're considered normal. We make sure the lights go on, planes don't crash, and see to it that most families and organizations and shit work. And so the hardy dandelions, they pop up between sidewalk cracks. The weeds you see growing on the side of the freeway, blankets, well-trodden soccer fields, and find its ways in the unsuspecting flower beds, right? You see dandelions everywhere. Cute little yellow flowers. They're everywhere. I don't care if it's rain, sleet, hail, storm, the hood, suburbs, city. You're going to see dandelions everywhere. In fact, dandelion greens are amazing for your blood if you juice them. But orchids, on the other hand, like their exotic namesake, right, are highly sensitive to their environment. You don't see orchids everywhere. Orchids are special, right? They don't grow everywhere. They don't thrive everywhere. In fact, most environments will stifle their growth. So stay with me. Now, too much adversity or social interaction can overwhelm the orchid. They are much more likely to wither under undue stress. Stress. That's the operative word, stress. Especially when their home lives are tumultuous. So you might recognize these traits under a different name. Introvert. How many of us are introverts? We don't really fool with people too tough. We're not really cool on a whole bunch of people and noise, and we don't do the whole lights, camera, action shit. We like a small little circle, get-togethers at the house, one-on-one conversation. We don't really do people, right? Introverts. So when we fail to pick ourselves up and show up and do our work, about 15% of dandelions are super thrivers who will excel no matter what. These are the people, more often than not, are extroverted, but not always. But the main trait in a dandelion is you can put them anywhere and they'll do well. right? So they work hard for stupid bosses and endure mean spouses and learn from lazy teachers, and they just survive and do well. And so it turns out about 20% of us are extra sensitive to our social environments. And that means how others treat you, whether you are encouraged, supported, and nurtured, makes a critical difference in whether you thrive or become a problem, right? So here's the big deal. You're probably like, okay, flowers, what are you saying? A large percentage of the super sensitive people achieve the extraordinary when they have a positive advocate or a nurturing environment. So as you can see, I'm talking metaphor here. I'm speaking metaphorically. There are two types of people. And the two types of people are dandelions and orchids. And the orchids are the introverts. Very special, need special attention, but very gifted. And the dandelions are more extroverted or less introverted, but can thrive wherever you put them. And the deal is this. Depending on what your personality type is, and you have to understand yourself. Get beyond the phrases, get beyond the scientific, psychological classifications, right? And understand the root behind it, and that is, what is your personality type? Who are you? And how do you deal with stress, right? So unlike dandelions, orchids need special attention, special treatment. Someone with super sensitive genes are known as orchids. They can thrive beautifully in a hothouse with just the right amount of water, nutrients, heat, and light. Orchids. But orchids don't grow out of cracks in driveways. Okay, you put an orchid in the hood, you put an orchid in the ghetto, in the projects, you put an orchid in the war zone, send them off to Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, and they're gonna crack. They're gonna go crazy. They're gonna end up in prison. They're gonna end up killing someone, shooting someone, ending up on dope, on drugs. You follow me? And so as children, orchids, they either wither around mean, judgmental, competitive people, or they fight back, often with violence. And this is why orchids and dandelions, this is why in some families you can see where there'll be 2 or 3 children who are raised in the exact same manner, raised in the exact same household, the exact same parenting. I always say to people, if you weren't raised, and this is not a jab or jib or anything, but if you weren't raised by a black woman, people, if you've been raised by a black woman in America, there are certain things you are just accustomed to. If you had a black mother, you are accustomed to certain type of ass whoopings when you got out of pocket and got out of line, right? It's universal. It's universal. I had a friend of mine who was Caucasian, and she's like, how is it that, we were at a party or something. She's like, how is it that all of you guys know how to do the, Cupid shuffle or electric slide or something came on and everybody started doing it? She's like, how do you all know how to do it? Is it like a flash mob? And I'm like, nah, it's just a cultural thing, right? It doesn't matter if you're from Detroit, Cleveland, Los Angeles, the Bronx, or Dallas. You know how to do the electric slide. You know how to do the Cupid shuffle. And you were raised a certain kind of way. Just certain shit happened to you as a child, right? And I'm not, again, this is no disrespect. It's not saying anyone's better or worse or no shit like that. We're talking about orchids and dandelions, and we're talking about personality types, and we're talking about environment and stress. Nurture versus nature is what it boils down to. And Again, if you were raised a certain kind of way, you just were accustomed to certain things and there are certain things you can get away with and certain shit you just couldn't get away with, and it's just a cultural thing. But I think that it builds you in a way, prepares you for whatever may come. I like to call it tough love. I believe in tough love. Not necessarily, I'm not saying, I don't advocate beating your children but tough love is that life is not easy and everything is not going to be handed to you. So you have to be resilient. You have to be strong in the face of adversity and opposition. I just believe that. If you're not, the smallest things are going to cause you to fold and crumble. Okay? So whether you're a dandelion or an orchid, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you are adverse to stress or you can handle stress like a champ, I think it's important, no matter what, to know that you're not going to have control over everything, right? Myself, I would like to consider myself an orchid. I'm an introvert and I'm an empath, and I don't do people. I don't do a whole lot of people, but I understand that in certain environments, I'm going to have to be extroverted. And I'm speaking to all my introverts right now, especially those who are highly sensitive people. Highly sensitive people. You're going to be thrown into all types of environments. And although you may be naturally quiet and reflective and easily overstimulated by social contact, I think it's important to understand that you're going to be exposed to all types of personalities and environments. And sometimes you're going to be placed in positions and times where your inner orchid will be depleted. You will be put in other words, there are times, it seems almost as though some of us orchids and introverts among us are placed in families full of extroverts and full of dandelions. Parents will give birth, extroverted dandelion type parents will give birth to these introverted orchid children. And oftentimes orchids are like that middle child or the youngest child, and all the other kids are dandelions. And although they're getting the same parental input, nurturing and parenting, they all turn out very different, right? That's why you can see families where it'll be 2 or 3 kids and one of them is bad as hell, right? Just out of control. You have one that's real good and successful, whatever, quote unquote, right? They go on and do big things, and then you have the one that's just like regular or whatnot. But they all got raised the same, in the same household, the same 2 parents, the same socioeconomic background, the same culture, all different. And I think that we have to understand that the orchids are delicate. Their petals are bruised and battered by commotion and noise and drama and people and shit and just, and they need restoration. They need peace. They need tranquility. They need serenity to restore a sound mind, right? And again, this is no jibe on anyone in particular, but most of us have genes that make us as hardy as dandelions. So I'm talking about dandelions. We're able to take root and survive almost anywhere, And a few of us who are the orchids, fragile. I don't want to say fickle, but just sensitive, delicate, but capable of blooming spectacularly if giving greenhouse care. So there's this provocative theory of genetics in science circles, which asserts that the very genes that give us the most trouble as a species, causing behaviors that are self-destructive and antisocial, also underlie humankind's phenomenal adaptability and evolutionary success. And with a bad environment and poor parenting, the parents that just leave kids to fend for themselves and feed themselves and fight for themselves, orchid children can end up depressed, drug addicted, or in jail. But with the right environment and good parenting, they can grow up to be society's most creative, successful, and happy people. Now understand certain variants of key behavioral genes, most of which affect either brain development or the processing of the brain's chemical messengers, make people more vulnerable to certain mood and psychiatric or personality disorders. I always say, you have to think about your pH, your own psychosis, if you will. We all have different chemistry going on. And that's why you can take two different people and put them in the same situation, and one will squirm and not be able to deal with the pressure, and the other one will, no sweat. But over the past 15 years, there have been studies that have been done, and they have this hypothesis. It's called the stress diathesis, or genetic vulnerability model. And it's come to saturate psychiatry and behavioral science. And during that time, basically researchers have identified a dozen odd gene variants that can increase a person's susceptibility to depression, anxiety, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, heightened risk taking, and antisocial or sociopathic or violent behaviors, and all these other problems or whatnot. But if and only if the person carrying the variant suffers a traumatic or stressful childhood, or faces particularly trying experiences later in life. So in other words, basically, there's shit embedded in us, things in our DNA, things in our genetic makeup, that basically, if certain shit happens to you in your life based on what's in your DNA, it can turn on certain genes to make you just completely snap. That's why you have some people, you don't understand, it doesn't make sense. They come from these great homes, good two-parent so-called, right? Good so-called, quote unquote, good two-parent home. Parents had great jobs, made good money, successful, healthy, they went to good schools. They were raised by well-meaning coaches and teachers, and went to church and all that good stuff. And yet they turn 21, 22 and they just go crazy. What was it, a couple of years, the guy, Dylan Storm Roof, who went and killed all those 9 people in South Carolina, in the U.S. Although I believe that he was a CIA operative. I believe he was an alter, and I believe that he was a monarch, Project Monarch. He was a monarch slave, and his altar was turned on. That's another show, another conversation. But the point is, you have these kids that were raised a certain kind of way, and all of a sudden they turn into these mass murderers, right? Snipers and shit. They turn into killers. They turn into sociopaths. When I was growing up, I remember back in the 80s, in California, there was the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez was his name. I'm not sure if he's still in prison or if he got the death penalty, but this man was just, he terrorized the streets. Raised as a good kid, came from a good home, and he just was a crazy psycho. This dude was just raping women, killing women. He was on a murder spree. And so I say that to say, you have these people who are raised good, and you talk to all of their old teachers and their parents and friends and neighbors and well-meaning adults who say, I knew them. They were good kids. He was a good kid. She was a good kid. They seemed good. They seemed normal. They were fine. They were good kids. And all of a sudden, they turn into maniacs, right? They turn into serial killers. What creates a serial killer? What creates a rapist? What creates a murderer? Or these women you see on Snapped. I love to watch Snapped or CNBC. Dateline. Like, what causes what causes a woman to just snap and kill your ass, stab somebody to death, shoot her ex-husband or father of her children? Or what causes these people to just dive off the deep end one day, right? And I'm saying to you, it can happen to any of us. You can be perfectly normal, raised by great parents, great parenting, went to great schools, educated, good, God-fearing, all that, and still turn into a maniac. All of a sudden, something can trigger you and you snap. And people come at you wrong and you kill their motherfucking ass. That's what I'm saying to you. And we're talking about stress. We're talking about orchids and dandelions and environmental factors, genetics and DNA. This is important, especially to you who are parents, who have kids, who have children. Because you don't know what's going to happen. You can be doing the best you can, right? I know a lot of guys, I have guy friends who are like, I just want to do everything I can to keep my daughter from off the pole, right? But, basically the children who suffer most from bad environments also profit the most from good ones. And that's why you can take certain children out of the hood, take them out of the ghetto, take them out of the projects, expose them to culture, okay? Take them out of the gutter, right? Expose them to culture, expose them to literature, expose them to travel, give them good, clean, healthy, wholesome examples and role models, right? And it changes their entire dynamic. It brings out certain artistic, creative abilities with them. Not saying they can't have those things in the ghetto, in the projects, in the gutter. But when I am saying when you take them out of that environment, if they naturally have it in their genetic makeup and in their DNA, it turns them into a beast. I mean, in a positive way. In science, in genetics, in biology, we're introduced to the notion of an allele, right? You learn about alleles when you talk about dominant and recessive genes, Darwinism. An allele is any of the variants of a gene that takes more than one form. Such genes are known as polymorphisms. Now, a risk allele is simply a gene variant that increases your likelihood of developing a certain trait or a certain problem. So, for instance, if one of your parents has blue eyes and the other parent has brown eyes, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to have brown eyes because brown is a dominant trait or dominant characteristic. Blue is a recessive trait or characteristic. It's less likely to be passed on, right? If one of your parents has sickle cell anemia and the other parent carries the gene for sickle cell anemia but does not necessarily express the gene for sickle cell anemia, you're more than likely 9 times out of 10 to have sickle cell anemia. Genetics, right? But I'm talking about how genetics plays into our behavior. And that's why you can have someone who was raised perfectly normal, but the father carries certain characteristics, and we see them in the child. We see them expressed in the kid. And you're like, where did that come from? I didn't teach them that. I didn't teach them how to be mean. I didn't teach them how to be manipulative. Where did they learn that from? I don't act like that. But it may be that characteristic may be carried in the genes, and if the environment is just crushing and difficult, that particular child, especially if they're an orchid child, they're going to express that trait. Follow me, stay with me. So what was your childhood like? What was your childhood like? What is your adulthood like? A lot of times, no matter how hard we try, we end up turning into our parents. How does that happen? You're like, I did everything different. I know people who they do not like their parents. They love them, they don't like them. They love their mom and dad, love them to a brand new life. Want no parts of them. Don't want to be like them. I get it. And yet and still, they end up just like their parents. To this day, I know men who cannot stand their fathers. Do not respect the way their fathers are. And yet, they've become their fathers. Ladies, many of us, without even trying, we've become our mothers. We are becoming our mothers. We sound like them. We look like them. We walk like them. We respond to stress like them. Many of us, we are raising our children the exact same way that our mothers raised us. And that's because we emulate what we were exposed to. We don't emulate what we're taught, what society says we should be doing or shouldn't be doing. We emulate what we were exposed to. And that's why it's so crucial and important to expose yourself and surround yourself by positive, uplifting, healthy examples. Whether that's, financially, psychologically, mentally, spiritually, to have people around you who are uplifting, cause you to think and to exceed your grasp. Orchids frequently suffer from a high number of challenging conditions, namely ADHD, depression. A lot of people, I know so many people that are suffering with depression, and yet some of these people are some of the most talented, creative people you will ever meet in your lifetime, but they're just chronically depressed. A lot of times they have dyslexia. That's a big one. And so nevertheless, they're called orchids for a reason. There's some famous ADHD orchids. Galileo, Walt Disney, Dwight Eisenhower, Stephen Hawking, Robin Williams, Abraham Lincoln, Michelangelo, Mark Twain, Winston Churchill, Buzz Aldrin are just a few extraordinary orchids who battled depression. Bill Gates, Edison, Henry Ford, Ted Turner, Muhammad Ali. Mama named him Cassius, I'm gonna call him Cassius. Da Vinci, Richard Branson, John Chambers, John Lennon, the Beatles. They've all transcended their dyslexia. And so you're saying, well, what's the point, right? Well, for both leaders, I'm talking to you leaders and you parents alike. It's this. Watch this. Emerging research indicates that this group, this list, these people, these super achieving orchids, it's not an accident. It's not by accident. It's not happenstance. New experiments are showing that people with a super sensitive, hypersensitive, these highly sensitive personality types and genetic makeups do worse in adverse environments, but absolutely zoom in supportive ones. Zoom. And by zoom, I mean orchids zoom past dandelions on all types of performance measures. And not everyone with, I'm not saying everybody with ADHD, depression, dyslexia is a genius. Not saying that. I know some of y'all like, oh, my kid, they dyslexic, got ADHD, they gonna be a genius. No. But I will say this, a disproportionate number may be extraordinary. And the lesson is this: don't treat everybody the same. And that's an important takeaway, whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a leader, whether you are, a supervisor, you have you're an entrepreneur, you have a business. Just in general, you can't treat everybody the same. Some people require a little more coaxing. Some people require a little more hand holding. Some people require less one-on-one. Some people need you to hold their hands. Everyone is different. Some of us are dandelions. Some of us are orchids. And sensitivity and resilience to stress is determined by genes. And that goes back to what I was talking about last week, and I say all the time, bloodline. Bloodline. You have to know your bloodline. That's why certain people, they only interbreed. Not interbreed in the sense that they're having sex with their cousins and shit, but interbreed meaning they stay within the lines of their bloodline because they want to continue to perpetuate the same type of personality type, genetic makeup, the build, the make and model of their DNA, if that makes any sense. Everybody in the family has blue eyes. They want to continue to have blue eyes. Everybody in the family has freckles and red hair and ginger. They want to continue and perpetuate freckles and red hair gingers. Everybody in the family has a strong build, very hefty, mesomorphic, easy to build muscle. They want to continue that. So they perpetuate that genetic bloodline and build and make up. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's not for me to decide, but it's what happens, right? So the presence or the absence of a specific gene variant makes a child emotionally delicate, makes a person. That's why some people can deal with a whole lot of shit and some people can't. Some people fold. A little bit of stress, and I think over my life, some of the shit I've been exposed to more, especially in my early 20s, mid to late 20s, than people in their 50s and 60s. I knew people, and to this day, people in their 50s and 60s, they haven't even been through the shit I've been through in my first, 25, 30 years. But I could deal with it. I can hang, I could roll with the punches and keep on. I didn't go crazy. And I know some people who go through half of what I went through and they fold. They're ready to blow their brains out. They jumping off a bridge. And it's not, you have to look at what's within you. You have to look at how you are built as a person. What's your makeup? Are you an orchid or a dandelion? What are you? An orchid or a dandelion? And this begs us to observe and take stock of our environment and family, the effect of peer pressure, culture, our customs, and how all this plays into genetics and our basic personality types. And that's why I said, what type of childhood did you have? And take a really good look at your childhood. And if you have children, look at how you're raising your children. Look at the similarities and the differences. If you don't have children, look at your childhood. Take a really good look at how you were raised, your parents and their style of parenting or whatnot. And look at how you behave in your relationships. A lot of us are attracted to our parent, meaning this. A lot of ladies, women, a lot of us are attracted to our fathers or the type of man our father was. Or for some of you women, some women are attracted to women who are like their women or mothers. Guys, a lot of guys are attracted to women who embody the traits and characteristics and strengths that their mothers have. Or they look for women who are the opposite of their mothers because they didn't like their mothers, or they had a strained relationship with their mother. So they want the exact opposite. And so I say all that to say, just look at how the shit you were exposed to, the role it has played on you as an adult, and what it has turned you into. What have you become as a result of your childhood, your parenting, your socioeconomic background, your education, the culture you were immersed in, and peer pressure, right? Peer pressure. Some of us are doing shit just based off because that's what everybody else is doing. Or that's what everybody else is saying is popping. And that's not really necessarily where our heart may be. How do genes sway our resilience or sensitivity? So in the end, we're all flower children, feeding on inner and outer nutrients in the hope that we'll have enough to fully unfold, to be ourselves without shame or hesitation, allowing our unique and universal beauty to manifest in this fleeting world for all to see. And until in time, like all things, we are gone. Orchids and dandelions. Thank you for listening. Respect and honor. And you guys be sure to have gratitude for this day. We're not promised tomorrow. None of us is promised tomorrow. Love on your kids. Love on your parents. If you have a mother, you have a father, call them today, tonight. Hug them. Take them out to brunch. Take them out to dinner. Love on them. And have gratitude for this day. We take every day for granted, and we are not promised. Life is sweet. It's good. Life is really good no matter what you're going through. I don't care what you are experiencing. Life is good. Every day above ground is a blessing and filled with hope and opportunity. So bless up. Peace. Talk to you next week.